I never thought my life would turn into a nightmare because of the woman I trusted the most. But after exposing my wife's secret life, I thought I was finally free. I was wrong. What happened next turned my world upside down, and now I have no choice but to fight back. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the craziest twists in this true story of betrayal, revenge, and karma. I thought it was over. I thought handing her those divorce papers would be the last time I'd have to deal with her lies, her betrayal, her fake apologies. But I underestimated her. She wasn't done with me, not yet. At first, she played the victim. She told her friends and family that I had overreacted, that I had misunderstood the situation. She painted herself as the innocent one, the one who had been blindsided by my paranoia and vindictiveness. It was almost impressive the way she spun the story. Almost. But then things started to fall apart for her. Word spread fast. People started asking questions. Mutual friends, coworkers, people who had seen her and her lover together started talking. The truth had a way of slipping through the cracks no matter how hard she tried to cover it up. The worst part for her? It wasn't just me exposing her. It was her own actions catching up to her. She had no idea that her lover wasn't as loyal as she thought. While she had been lying to me, he had been lying to her. I found out through a friend who worked in real estate. Turns out her lover had been renting a place in the city, one she had been sneaking off to on her so-called business trips. What she didn't know, he wasn't just renting it for her. He had another woman and she had been staying there too. So while my wife thought she was his special one, she was just part of a rotation. And it wasn't long before she found out. It happened 2 weeks after I handed her the divorce papers. She was still trying to play her cards, still trying to manipulate the situation, thinking she could walk away from this without losing anything. But then she showed up at his apartment one night unannounced. That was her mistake. Through my spyware, I knew exactly where she was, what time she got there, and how long she stayed. I wasn't even tracking her at that point. I had simply forgotten to turn off the app. And when I saw that she had driven across town to his place, I knew something was about to go down. She must have knocked on his door expecting the usual. Expecting to be let in, to be comforted, to hear him tell her how much better off they were without me. But instead, she got something else entirely. The door opened and she came face to face with another woman. Not just any woman. His real girlfriend. The argument started immediately. I couldn't hear it, but I didn't need to. I imagined the betrayal in her voice, the anger, the disbelief as she realized she had been nothing more than a side piece. The girlfriend, on the other hand, was calm, too calm. Almost like she already knew. And that's when it clicked. He had done this before. My wife wasn't the first. She was just one of many. She stormed out of the building moments later, her face red, her hands shaking. I watched on my tracker as she sat in her car for almost half an hour before finally driving away. Where did she go? Not home. Not to a friend's. She went to a bar. Alone. And that's where the next part of her downfall began. Because while she sat there drowning her sorrows, she didn't realize that people were watching. And not just strangers, people we both knew. People who had heard the rumors, who had started piecing things together. And when she finally broke down, telling the bartender some sob story about how her marriage had ended for no reason, someone caught it on camera. A short video clip. A drunk, slurring mess of a woman ranting about how her perfect life had fallen apart, how everything had gone wrong. It went viral in our social circle overnight. By morning, everyone knew. She had been exposed in the worst way possible, not by me, not by her lover, but by her own recklessness. And now she had nowhere to hide. She had no idea how fast everything would collapse. The morning after her drunken breakdown at the bar, her phone must have been blowing up with messages. People she once called friends were now gossiping about her behind her back, sharing the video, passing judgment. And the worst part? She had no one to blame but herself. I could only imagine the panic setting in as she scrolled through her notifications, trying to figure out just how many people had seen it. It wasn't just some embarrassing moment that would be forgotten in a few days. This was different. This was evidence. Proof of what she had done, proof of how far she had fallen. And it didn't take long for it to reach the wrong people. Her job, for example. She had always prided herself on being a respected businesswoman, someone who maintained a professional image. But her boss? Not so much. He wasn't the forgiving type, and he definitely wasn't the kind of person who wanted scandals tied to his company. The moment the video hit the local scene, it was over for her. I found out later that she had been called into the office that same afternoon. She must have walked in, still thinking she could talk her way out of it, still believing that if she just spun the right story, she could fix everything. But there was no fixing this. The company had a strict policy about public image. And thanks to her little drunken rant and the rumors that had already been swirling, she was now a liability. A scandal waiting to happen. They didn't want to be associated with that. So they let her go. Just like that. No severance, no second chances. One moment she was sitting comfortably in her high-paying job, and the next, she was unemployed. I found out through a mutual friend later that day. Apparently, she had called him, practically begging for help. She didn't tell him the full story, of course. Just that she had been unfairly targeted and needed someone to back her up. But by then, no one was willing to stick their neck out for her. Not after everything she had done. And if she thought losing her job was bad, she hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. Because while she was scrambling to figure out what to do next, her financial situation was already crumbling beneath her. See, she had always been reckless with money. Even when we were married, she had a habit of spending more than she earned, always assuming that things would just work themselves out. But now there was no one to clean up her mess. She had legal fees to pay for the divorce, rent due at the end of the month, and suddenly no steady income. And her lover? The one she had thrown everything away for? He was long gone. After she caught him with his real girlfriend, he had cut ties completely. No calls, no messages, nothing. He had moved on without a second thought, and now she was left standing in the wreckage of the life she had destroyed. She tried reaching out to old friends, the ones who hadn't already distanced themselves from her. But most of them either ignored her calls or gave her the same response. I don't want to get involved. She had built her life on lies, deception, and manipulation. But the moment she needed people to support her, she realized she had no real friends left. And that's when the desperation set in. One evening, just a few days after she lost her job, she showed up at my house. I knew she would. I had been expecting it. I watched from the window as she stood there, hesitating before finally knocking. I could see it in her posture. She wasn't confident anymore. She wasn't the same woman who had once walked through this door acting like she owned the world. She was defeated. I waited a moment before opening the door, letting her stand there in the cold. Then finally I pulled it open. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not anger. Not arrogance. Fear. She took a shaky breath. Can we talk? I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. About what? She swallowed hard, glancing past me into the house. I could tell she wanted to step inside, to pretend like things weren't as bad as they really were. But I wasn't going to give her that comfort. I just need a little help, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I almost laughed. After everything she had done, after everything she had put me through, she really thought she could just waltz back into my life and ask for help? I tilted my head. Help with what? She hesitated, her hands clenching at her sides. I lost my job, she said finally. I'm struggling right now. I just need a little support until I can figure things out. I stared at her for a long moment, letting her words sink in. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't apologizing. She was asking for a bailout. And that's when I realized something. She hadn't learned a thing. She wasn't here because she regretted what she had done. She wasn't here because she wanted to make things right. She was here because she had nowhere else to go. And that wasn't my problem. I took a slow breath, then stepped back, gripping the edge of the door. Yeah, I said, nodding. I have some advice for you. Her eyes lit up for a brief second, like she actually thought I was about to say something helpful. I gave her a small, humorless smile. Figure it out yourself. Then, without another word, I shut the door in her face. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting, listening. I half expected her to knock again, to yell, to cry, to do something. But she didn't. She just stood there for a moment, probably realizing that she had lost the last person who had ever truly cared about her. And then, just like that, she was gone. I watched through the window as she walked back to her car, her shoulders slumped, her steps slow. And for the first time since this all started, I felt nothing. No anger. No resentment. Just relief. She had made her choices. And now she was living with them. And me? I was finally free. After I shut the door in her face, I expected that to be the last time I'd have to deal with her. I thought she would take the hint, accept that her actions had led her to this point, and disappear from my life for good. But I underestimated her desperation. She wasn't done yet. For the next few days, she tried every trick in the book. She sent text messages, left voicemails, even showed up at my workplace. Each time, she played a different angle, apology, guilt, anger, even nostalgia, like somehow reminding me of our past together would erase everything she had done. I ignored her at first, deleting her messages without even reading them. But then, one night, she left me a voicemail that was different. Her voice wasn't just desperate this time. It was frantic. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice shaking. They're coming after me. I need your help. I played the message again, frowning. They? Who was she talking about? I wasn't about to call her back, but my curiosity got the better of me. So I did what I had done so many times before. I tracked her location through the spyware she had forgotten was still installed on her phone. And what I saw made me pause. She wasn't at home. She wasn't at a bar or some random motel. She was in a parking lot near the city's business district. Alone. I debated for a moment. This wasn't my problem anymore. She had made her choices and I had already walked away. But something in me wanted to see how bad things had really gotten for her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was closure. Either way, I got in my car and drove to her location. When I pulled up, she was sitting on the hood of her car, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her face was pale, her eyes darting around nervously as if she expected someone to jump out at her at any second. She looked up when she saw my car, relief flashing across her face. She pushed off the hood and rushed toward me, but I didn't move. I stayed by my door, arms crossed, waiting for an explanation. I thought you weren't going to come, she breathed, stopping a few feet away. I shrugged. I wasn't. Her expression twisted with frustration, but she took a deep breath and forced herself to stay calm. I messed up, she admitted. Badly. I said nothing. She glanced over her shoulder as if checking for someone. Then she lowered her voice. I borrowed money, she whispered. A lot of money. Now that got my attention. From who? She hesitated. Some guys, people who lend money under the table. I exhaled slowly. Loan sharks. She swallowed and nodded. I almost laughed. It was unbelievable. First, she destroyed our marriage, then she lost her job, then her reputation, and now she had gone so far off the rails that she was borrowing money from criminals? How much? I asked. Her lips trembled. 40,000. I let out a sharp breath. Are you out of your mind? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. She had done this to herself. I thought I could pay it back, she stammered. I was desperate. I had no job, no place to go, no one to turn to. She looked at me pleadingly. I didn't think they'd come after me so fast. I shook my head, disbelief flooding through me. You really expect me to help you? She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. I don't have anyone else, she whispered. That's not my problem, I said coldly. She blinked rapidly as if trying to process the fact that I wasn't going to save her. Please. They said if I don't pay by the end of the week, she choked on her words, wrapping her arms around herself. I could guess what they had threatened her with. And for a brief second, I felt a flicker of pity. But then I reminded myself who she was, what she had done. She had spent years lying to me, betraying me, using me. And now, when she had lost everything, she was standing in front of me, expecting me to clean up her mess again. I wasn't that man anymore. I stared at her for a long moment, then shook my head. Find another way. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked truly lost, truly helpless for the first time in her life. And then, just when I thought she had finally accepted her fate, her expression hardened. You're really just going to let them come after me, she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. You think that's my fault? She laughed bitterly. You made me desperate. I stared at her in disbelief. I made you desperate? I repeated. You cheated. You lied. You destroyed our marriage. You lost your job. You took money from criminals. That was all you. She clenched her jaw, but she had no comeback. I'm done, I said firmly. For good. And with that, I turned, got into my car, and drove away. I didn't look back. But what I didn't know was that this wouldn't be the last time I'd hear from her. Not even close. I thought that was the end of it. I had walked away, left her standing in that parking lot with nothing but her own mess to deal with. I had done more than enough. But somehow she still found a way to drag me back into the chaos. It happened 3 nights later. I was asleep when my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, but then it kept going, call after call, one after another. Groggy, I reached for my phone, ready to turn it off. But when I saw the name on the screen, I froze. It wasn't her. It was a friend. Someone I hadn't talked to in a while. Someone who wouldn't be calling in the middle of the night unless something was seriously wrong. I picked up. Dude, his voice was urgent, almost out of breath. Are you okay? I frowned, still trying to shake off the sleep. What? Yeah, I'm fine. Why? There was a pause. Then he exhaled sharply. You need to get online. Now. Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the first news site that came to mind. Nothing. Then I opened social media. And there it was. My name. My face. All over the place. And right beside it? Hers. My ex-wife. But it wasn't some normal post, not some random gossip about our divorce. This was bigger. Someone had leaked something. Something bad. I clicked the first link I saw. A news article. The headline punched me in the gut. Local woman claims she was ruined by ex-husband and now she's missing. My stomach tightened. I scrolled down, my hands stiff, my breath caught in my throat. The article detailed everything. How she had lost her job. How she had been struggling financially. How she had supposedly been abandoned by those closest to her. And then the worst part, her claim that I had been the reason she was in this situation. I clenched my jaw. Of course she would do this. But it got worse. The article claimed that she had been in danger because of her debts. That she had reached out for help and been ignored. That she had disappeared just hours after making one last plea to the only person who could save her. Me. And now? She was missing. I sat back, exhaling sharply. I knew exactly what this was. A stunt. A last-ditch effort to make me look like the villain. But the public didn't know that. I clicked through the comments, my chest tightening. People were eating it up. What kind of person leaves their ex to deal with loan sharks? If this guy really did nothing wrong, why didn't he help her? She begged for help and he turned her away. Wow. If anything happens to her, this guy should be held responsible. My blood boiled. It didn't matter that she was the one who had cheated. It didn't matter that she had lied, manipulated, and thrown away everything we had. It didn't even matter that I had already helped her more than she deserved. None of that mattered anymore. All that mattered was that she was gone. And now, the world was looking at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. I shut my laptop and stood up, pacing the room. My mind raced. Was she really missing? Or was this just another way to control the narrative? I checked the spyware. Her phone was still active. Which meant she wasn't dead. She wasn't kidnapped. She wasn't being held hostage by some violent loan shark. She was somewhere hiding. She had done this on purpose. I grabbed my keys. If she thought she could use this as her final move to make me look like the bad guy, to turn the public against me, then she was about to learn just how wrong she was. Because I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time.